Our panel discussion will be developer community building challenges and experience sharing。那我们的座谈会呢，将会是以建立开发者社群的挑战及经验分享。那我们今天呢，总共邀请到了6位的分享者。那呢，我现在就将我的麦克风交给我们的志成。Let me give my microphone to 志成 and 志成 will be the moderator for this panel discussion. And 志成 is from Ethereum researcher, right? Okay.
Thank you very much. Yeah. Hello, thank you to join this panel. This is an easy one. It's not like no technical part, but I think everyone spent a lot of time and efforts on this topic. But before we begin this panel, I want to poll the audience. So who here consider yourself a developer? Okay. And who here think yourself is not a developer? And who here wants to be a developer? Oh, that's really nice. Yeah, amazing. So, yeah, we are honored to have our great panelists. Let me introduce Albertini from the Ethereum Foundation. And Foundation has been working on supporting the developers and the ecosystem. And Liam Horn from L4 and notably East Global. East Global hosts hackathons all over the world, and we'll learn a story. And Yuriko from Plasma Lab, but she built an amazing student society in college. And Raul, I invited as a project owner, so to learn about when developers work on a project and how the project need to attract talents to the code base. And finally, we have Scott Moore, and maybe you have attended to Scott's previous previous talk, and Scott has a lot of funding model and sustainability model for open source projects. So now that each panelist share their stories, start from Albert.
Sure. I'll try this. Cool. Hello, everybody. Thank you, Chicheng. I'm Albert from the Ethereum Foundation. As you would expect, we think a lot about developer, really every aspect of developer communities, not just growing the developer communities, but also helping existing developers be more impactful. So I'm very looking forward to just hearing the thoughts from everyone else on this panel. I feel like a big part of my job is to hear as much as I can from different perspectives, and hopefully we at the Ethereum Foundation can use that to do better at supporting the ecosystem.
Hello, yeah, I'm Liam from ETH Global. In college, I started this thing called Hack the North, which became the largest collegiate hackathon in the world, where every year nearly 1,500 students from around the world go to Canada and build projects on all kinds of different things. It wasn't Ethereum specific, it was just a general hackathon. And I noticed that there was a trend in Ethereum where you could get an enormous number of people, like you are all a representative of today, interested in the technology to come and build something together over a weekend. And so that's what the genesis idea was behind ETH Global. So like you mentioned, we run these hackathons all over the world, literally in Paris, Berlin, Buenos Aires, San Francisco, Singapore. And we get developers like you that want to build on Ethereum. And so I've obviously seen a lot of growth in this industry, and I think it's a really interesting time to be working on this stuff.
Hello everyone, my name is Eureka. I'm currently taking a gap year from my university and working full-time at a company called Crypto Economics Lab, building an L2 application framework. Before starting working at Crypto Economics Lab, I was running a student group, research and development blockchain student group at my university. It's Waseda University in Tokyo. And during that time, I was facing a lot of challenges to kind of including a lot of developers, students who are interested in blockchain space. So I'm excited to hear everyone's opinion on it and to discuss it. Thank you.
Hi, everybody. This is Raul. I work for a company called Protocol Labs in the libB2B project. If you're not familiar with Protocol Labs, you might have heard about libB2B itself, IPFS or Filecoin. The technology that we build tends to be directed and targeting the infrastructural pieces of the decentralized stack. So for us, it tends to be very difficult to get people and developers really engaged and to understand those deep layers of the stack and get really engaged and pumped up and excited about contributing to those. The ecosystems that we're building are very open. We have created these projects, but we don't consider ourselves the owners of these projects, particularly of libB2B. libB2B is being adopted by a large number of downstream users, including Ethereum 2.0, as a strong, rock-solid networking layer that powers the protocol itself. So I'm super excited about this panel. It's been, as I say, it's very difficult for Protocol Labs to engage people and to market the importance of the technology that we build in, which is not always visible. It doesn't have a visible head. It doesn't have a UI. So it's very difficult for people to understand what it's about. So yeah, super excited about this panel.
Cool. I'm Scott Moore. I work in a project called Gitcoin, which helps you sort of sustain your open source projects in a variety of ways. We actually got started in a very similar way to Liam, and in fact have sort of a history with ETH Global. A lot of our early work was sort of started around the first ETH Waterloo in Waterloo, Canada. And we've been really focused on not only trying to solve this sustainability problem, but also figuring out ways to get more Web 2 developers actually engaged in Web 3. There's usually a bit of a gap in learning and understanding. And by sort of creating these good first issues, these easy ways for people to get engaged, this is a way that we see our role in building the developer community kind of flourishing.
Okay, that was fast. And then, so my first question is that, so you can, as you can see, the panelists here are they're having their core tasks. They are busy on their own projects, but they have some time to allocate to the community building. But what are some efforts you always want to do but have no resources like time or funding or friends to bring more talents to the ecosystem? You want to?
Sure. I think when you talk about what we wish there was more time and resources for, there's so many different areas, because I think one of the biggest challenges for any new space is quality beats quantity every time in terms of getting people interested. So each person, it's really one or two big things that suddenly makes them go from maybe interested to very interested. And one of the big challenges is how do you kind of customize for different types of people so that the thing that they might not realize they should know about the blockchain space, how do you make them aware of that? But if you want to do that scalably, you can't just sit down with everybody individually and learn what their interests are and learn what motivates them. And so almost by definition, there's always more ways that more resources can be used to help grow the ecosystem. I think more concretely, one thing that I think a lot about, and even like the local grants program that we talked about earlier as an example, is how to find like, instead of making it so that you have to join the entire blockchain or Ethereum ecosystem, how do you make it a little bit easier and kind of safer for people to get started? And sometimes that means like making it a little bit smaller, finding a local community. It could be at a university, it could be at a hackathon. I know personally just having dinner with some friends. And I think doing more to make it easier for other people to do that. So I'm not going to tell you how to have dinner with your friends, but maybe we can give you some suggestions for how to organize it so you can focus on the hard part, which is like the specific group of friends that you know best. So those are some of the things that I always wish there was just like way more resources so we could go to every city in the world, we could go to every virtual community in the world. But I think we can do better at like making it easier for people in those communities to bootstrap more. And so that's one of the things that we're thinking a lot about at the Ethereum Foundation nowadays.
Yeah, okay, so peer-to-peer networking, which is what Libby2B focuses on, has been pretty niche for the last few decades. And as more platforms are being built, more decentralized assets are being built and public goods for the world, more developers are realizing that having important, like rock-solid foundations and having stable technologies where we can all collaborate to build a great networking layer that a lot of projects can rely on is important. So making the leap between peer-to-peer networking being like a pretty niche topic in the engineering side of things to making it more mainstream, getting people excited, that kind of outreach, that kind of technical communication, you know, and we are a bunch of engineers in the Libby2B team at Protocol Labs, right? And engineers don't precisely like writing documentation, blogging, and communicating outwards. And putting the focus on that is a huge linchpin to be able to untap and to unlock a lot of potential that there is in the developer community in the world, if only they knew that their work, if they spent and invested, you know, their time and resources in learning this technology and contributing to it because it's open source, that would unlock a lot of value for everybody that's building decentralized platforms, right? Because it's this thing that networking, peer-to-peer networking is this thing that underpins everything else, right? And you can't build robust decentralized platforms if the network is fragile.
Just to add to what's being said, I fully agree with both points that have been made already. I think I would add like mentorship as one core component that is also really hard to scale. Like you can't easily just get like mentors in every local community to just like volunteer and pop up. But I think if we can find ways to try to get more of those people engaged and maybe incentivize them more to be mentors, I think that's super valuable and like powers basically helps solve this problem that Ruel's talking about too, where like it's not really common for most people to be dealing with like, this level of granular like network stack work when they're like entering their development career. So it's like hard for a new developer to really engage in this ecosystem in like an effective way. And if we can make it easier for them, I think that's better for the ecosystem overall.
I would say one of the things that I wish that I had in the ecosystem of Japan from a perspective of student, we kind of lack technical professors who are knowledgeable on the technical side of blockchain. And it was kind of tough to find a professor who can be responsible for my student club. And in the end, we got to find this professor from a law department who's researching anti-money laundering and stuff like that. But it was, yeah, kind of tough to find a CS background, a professor who has a computer science background. And yeah, I wish they can open up more classes for students who are interested in learning blockchain technology, but new to the space. Yes.
I think Scott brings up a really pain point. I've been hearing many like blockchain developer and researchers, they complain about the mentorship. Is like the lack of mentorships. There's like they have to like search and like find out, figure out things themselves. But like it's really difficult to like get like professional to like get some advice. Not sure if you have some experience or like comments for mentorship. Yeah, or like yeah, or your program projects provide some mentorship.
So one aspect is, well, speaking from an open source project, we try to make the community itself, or at least the people who make the P2P or IPFS, Filecoin, and so on, they're basically the core part of the workday, right? Because we work at Protocol Labs, we try to be very welcoming to everybody that tries to, either file an issue or open a pull request or whatever, and we try to provide that level of mentorship for people to whenever you file a pull request, even if it's not mergeable straight away, it's not a matter of just getting your code to be a contribution, but it's also like we take that as an opportunity to help instruct or teach people on how to do future contributions as well to the project, or maybe instill development practices, or tell them about like things that they haven't immediately spotted that could turn into bugs or whatever. So make that a learning experience for them as well as for us, right? Because at the end of the day, open source is a two-way street, right? So that continued level of mentorship, I think it's important in open source communities, right? For the collaboration aspect to prosper.
One thing I'll mention is that in Ethereum, something that's really unique is that there's very few gates that prevent you from collaborating with and working with literally the people on the bleeding edge. In a lot of other places, it's the case that if you want to work with the leading researcher in some area, you have to go through a bunch of hoops, maybe attend some institution, and it's just hard. But in Ethereum, if you just take the time to understand what the latest work is and you write a post on ETH Research, pretty much immediately you're going to be chatting with Vitalik and they're going to be taking your ideas very seriously. So I would definitely take advantage of that, especially if you're like an up-and-coming student or someone that wants to build a research career. Ethereum is a phenomenal place to go from no one ever having heard of you to immediately becoming one of the most well-known people if you put in the time and effort. And I've seen countless people in this space do that. And one even strategy for that, if you're seriously considering that, is take one of the ideas that are kind of vaguely out there right now and write it up into a very well-structured paper that goes through all the details. There's one guy I know that did this really well. He wrote up a paper for the plasma cache construction. He just took what was out there in talks and then ETH research posts and just wrote a formalization of it. And that became the standard like description of plasma cache. And now it's used as a reference in all kinds of other papers. And he's now well known as being like the layer 2 guy. So anyone can do this if you just take the time and put in the effort.
I think one of the things that's really interesting, as Liam mentioned, there are very few like hard gates in Ethereum, like things that like are hard obstacles. And so what you're left with are soft gates, like things that exist maybe because you personally like put it on yourself or even culturally. And so one thing that we thought a lot about in the Ethereum Foundation is if you look at different cultures around the world, different cultures will have a different style for how they will approach new problems and new areas. One of the reasons we focused the local grants program on Asian communities at first is because we know that, at least stereotypically, in a lot of Asian cultures, people are uncomfortable kind of asking questions or getting involved until they feel like they're already an expert. But this is in a fast-moving new space, no one is really an expert, so part of it is about getting out of your own comfort zone for like how much confidence you need to have to move forward. That said, not everybody can be expected to approach the problems in the same way. And so I think one of our big challenges that we would like your feedback from is, how can we go to different areas and make it so that moving one step out of your comfort zone is enough to make progress right now, I think in some cultures, you'd have to move 5 steps out of your comfort zone, whereas in others, you only have to move 1 or 2. And so that's why a lot of the research and progress is dominated by those areas where you only are moving 1 or 2. And so thinking in terms of how many steps outside of one's comfort zone they need to move to be a contributor and how we can build the bridges around those steps, that's something that we care a lot about, and we're going to need the feedback from everybody in every area so that we can provide better options for that.
Just adding to Albert's comment, I just want to share my own experience with other students, if there are some of the students are here. At the time that I joined the space, I literally knew nothing, but I was just curious what's going on in the space. And last summer, I went to this conference in Hong Kong, and I just went talk to this person called Virgil.
Hello.
Here. Okay. Virgil Griffith. He's one of the managers at Ethereum Foundation. I didn't know he was that special person at that time, but he treated me very nicely, and he introduced me some of the very professional researchers. I jumped into the space, and a lot of the researchers, professional researchers, helped me through learning some of the new things, and that helped me a lot. So I was doing the exact same thing that Albert was saying. I got out of my comfort zone. I was making an effort to new things that I didn't know at all. So please join the space with your courage, and it's going to be super fun. So
I just want to quickly add to Liam's point, and I think that's a really good story. I would just say, like, in addition to like research, just looking at like what's out there, like that's of interest to you, like on GitHub, like what projects are interesting to you, what protocols are interesting to you, just like opening up issues or just working with existing issues and trying to like open up a PR for them is a really good starting point. And like there's nothing stopping you if you want to go and like do that.
Yeah, I just wanted to add to the previous points here. I think if you realize this space is being built as we speak, right, and it's being built every single day, and the people who are building it tend to be the ones that are presenting their own work at conferences, at meetups, and so on. So don't be afraid to reach up to them and speak to the people about the work that they're presenting, because in many cases they are the authors and they're interested as well, and they are invested in it, and they're happy to continue elaborating on that topic, exploring ideas with you, helping onboard you into that topic to continue contributing. So don't be afraid to like break that barrier, break the ice, because generally like you might feel that there is some kind of blocker that does never exist. There's no blockage, right? And in most of the cases it doesn't exist, because as I say, people want to speak about their work, and at the end of the day, everything that's being built here, most of the things are open source, right? So they're built on the principle of collaboration, and they're built on the principle of getting a community together to continue evolving it as one.
Yeah, okay. So I think there are like the soft gate is the challenge of the barrier of entry to the system, and I think Yuriko's example is really good. Like just talk to people, but as Scott says, you try to explore all the open source project, but most of the project in ecosystem, they are really hard to understand, or like P2P is you need to understand the blockchain, and then you start to appreciate the value of the P2P layer. But how do you get the new contributors to start to appreciate those niche projects and get started with it?
I have one way to answer that, which is the best way to get in is to try to build something, like in the shortest time frame you can imagine. Like, what can you get done in like 7 days? Just set a hard deadline for yourself. I want to build some project which takes advantage of blockchains in 7 days. And then when you start to do that, you're going to be forced to figure out all these different elements of your project. There's probably going to be some peer-to-peer messaging component. You're going to figure out the UI. How do you interact with wallets? How is the contract designed? Like the whole system you have to figure out, and just try to set a limit to yourself in 7 days to get something, literally anything built. And by doing that, you'll realize, oh shit, there's a lot of stuff in this industry, and that's when you understand why there's so many people doing stuff. So yeah, the best way is just like understand one project really well, and you'll find all these pieces in the process.
And to do that, maybe it's better to join one of the hackathons, like ETH Global host. I just recently joined ETH Boston that happened last month, and it was very good experience. A lot of projects were providing their own product so that everyone can utilize that product into their product they are building during the hackathon. So it's maybe easier for intermediate beginners.
Yeah, so from a project perspective, I think it's on us to make it easy for people to actually get acquainted enough, and people have different styles, right? And people have different learning styles and ways that they want to ramp up to understand a particular set of technologies. Some of them want to get into building straight away. Others want to be able to read technical documentation up front to like figure out all the different elements in their mind to then start reading code and actually start developing with that piece. So we need to cover all of these bases as projects, right? And that in some cases is challenging, right? So one model that I like a lot is self-serve. So if we use platforms, for example, like Gitcoin or other platforms, or even in hackathons, ETH Global hackathons and so on, we encourage people to we give them enough information by our workshop within those hackathons and so on to give them enough information so that they can start exploring the code base, or they can start exploring a project, and then they themselves writing documentation that would be essentially for them. But if it's for them because they're new people in this project, then it's probably readable by a lot more people of their same level, right? So we can use that kind of like the dog feeding aspect of writing documentation for oneself to then push it out to the crowd, right? That is one good way of onboarding people. Projects need to make it very easy so that minimize the friction, so that when there's a potential contributor that might be potentially interested in your project that would not like to hack with it, but would like to build inside it. So instead of actually using it as a library, you would, in the case of libp2p, there are users that are more interested in building libp2p itself and like playing with DHTs and PubSub and playing with handshake protocols and multiplexing and so on, than actually building applications, right, on top of libp2p. That's particularly my case, right? And that's why I work on the project itself. To make it easy for those people, they need to have one place where they can go and see everything that needs their help in the project, right? And this could be GitHub issues that are tagged specifically, which then get promoted, for example, via bounties and Gitcoin or whatever. But there's a lot more things that can be done, and I think the projects really need to level up in this, particularly libp2p. Yep.
Just to add, I think that makes a lot of sense. Like documentation, I just want to like really hit home that it's kind of our bad as a community in part. Like our documentation is not that good, and tutorials are not that good. Like I think this is more of an ask for the community. But if you do happen to go through Liam's like steps and like build your own project, just really making sure that you have good documentation and making sure that you have like almost, if you could write a tutorial for it, I think that'd be super helpful. Often you'll find that like when you search for a certain topic, it'll be out of date by like maybe a year or so. There'll be like a Medium article or something. And like that is something we need to rectify. So we definitely are working on that. But that's a call to action for the community as well to add to that.
Albert, do you have anything to add?
Sure, I guess the only thing I have to add, people have said so many great things here, so I'll just go in a different direction and remind everyone that it's okay to go at your own pace. I think what's wonderful about this ecosystem is it's new, it's growing. There will be many, many years of like great changes and improvements to come. I know that especially nowadays, it always feels like you have to rush into everything because like you're gonna miss your chance. I felt like I missed blockchain and Ethereum when I first got interested in 2016, right? So everyone feels that way at first, but you have to go at your own pace. And it's the opposite of running out of things to do. There's going to be more things to do. It's going to be easier to get started. So when you are feeling ready and maybe energized to do more than like following and reading, you've heard a lot of good ideas from this group. But yeah, like in 2020 and 2021 and so on, there's just going to be even more here. So, take your time if you need it.
Yeah, thanks. That's a really good advice. And I'm thinking taking question from the audience. Any questions?
So hi, I'm Vinny. So I'm kind of like co-organizer for this event. So I'm just wondering, because we're talking about developer community, and my background is actually from startup. So in startup we're talking about ecosystem, but it's pretty similar things. But I'm just wondering, like Taiwan, we have like really good engineer, group, and then we have, different kind of language, community, and they were doing pretty well. I'm just wondering, for developer, is there a sort of layer, you recall just say, you think if Japan got more professor teaching school, and that might be get more student understand blockchain. So I'm just wondering, as a, Taipei Ethereum meetups, co-organizer, I'm just wondering, is there a sort of the way to sort of build, community layer by layer, and then how do we sustain the, system? So Zhicheng or, our major, organizer, they have to, answer all different kind of, questions, but, would be easier to just that, anyway, my idea just is there layer, structure for developer to kind of learn by themselves, and then, to learn as a group, that kind of thing. Thanks.
I don't have an answer for the entirety of the layering, but one small thing that you guys could do that I would recommend doing is run a hackathon. Yeah, really, just imagine everyone in this room, instead of watching us talk, we're talking amongst each other and working on projects on their laptops together. And at the end of the day, they all present what they built. That's a really fast way of learning a lot of the things that maybe you don't realize you could learn much quicker than it seems. So that's my one recommendation.
In terms of nurturing a good developer community, I would add. I actually got the same question from a person from Ethereum Foundation before. Why isn't there a good developer community in Japan, even though it seems there are a lot of good developers individually who are interested in blockchain? And I think it took me a while to think about the question. I couldn't answer the question immediately, but now that I think, there's not a lot of knowledgeable investors, venture capitals, who can invest on this protocol technology. There aren't a lot of good startups who can invest their times on their protocol research. And then there is not a lot of good protocol developer community here. So it's like a notorious cycle coming from the venture capital, not good funding resource. So maybe one thing we wish to have in Japan, as well as maybe Taiwan, is a good venture capital funding resource who are knowledgeable on the protocol itself.
Yeah, those are very good points. Another aspect that I would like to add is one thing that's amazing about being part of this ecosystem is the fact that you get to work on global technologies with a global team that's spread across the world that mixes so many different cultures, so many different languages, so many different approaches about how to think, like in terms of thinking about things, reasoning through, and communicating. It's just like it's just mind-boggling that any developer anywhere in the world can participate in this global ecosystem, right? And I think not a lot of developers have realized this, in the sense that I come from a small island in Spain, right? And most people who are studying at university, most people who are studying, for the future, they get told that they have to look for a job, normally in the same place where they work, or they have to relocate. But the fact that being a developer, being an engineer in this particular set of technologies gives you unlimited access to work for any company that in the world, or any project, or build your own project, or participate in open source communities, like structure your day in whichever way that you want to structure it and get incentivized for it, that's just amazing, right? And so reducing that friction between as a developer, what do I invest in learning, right? So that it will get me somewhere in the future. And to make those developers realize that by learning this, they can literally, they have, a limited pathway to the future. I think that is, a potential linchpin as well.
All right. I think the time is almost up. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I think that concludes. Oh, okay. Oh, because we have a break, and so we can take another one questions from the audience. So, anyone? Okay.
Sorry, I'm not supposed to ask this question since I'm one of the staff here. My name is Jun, and I'm a researcher, and also I'm kind of co-organizer of the Taipei Film Meetup, and I just came back from DevCon as well. So I would like to give you a feedback and a small question about hackathon things. So the feedback is, so I heard Ralph says, when you are trying to attend some of the conferences, you can always approach the speaker and share your new ideas. This mindset is kind of different from how the Asian students behave, because we normally just think there's a gap and there's a distance between the instructor and the student. It's not easy for students from Asia to take that leap, because you gotta we're supposed to we used to try to build more confidence on what we already have, to have the courage to approach to the instructor. So I think that this kind of mindset is pretty important. To all of us here in this room. And as a co-organizer from Taipei Meetup, I think one of the challenge is to bring the information, the technology itself to the newcomers. And this is actually hard, because we already run the community for 3 years. And we were doing video taping, and we just record everything on the speech, and then we would post on video. But the audience not that much. So we then tried another approach, which is we write an articles, no matter it's an intermediate level or a more advanced articles. But still, these contents are not really get into the audience. It's not really well known yet. So maybe the hackathon's the next step we should take. So I would like to hear more opinions from ETH Global. And so you say this is basically the best way to bring in developers together and figure out something, learn new stuff. So is there any outcome afterwards? Like, for example, any content that sort of in a well-curated sense, so that the people who are going to join the next hackathon is going to reuse that content? or is there any ideas that you were going to conduct? Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good question. I think it might be the case that hackathons are kind of like the best way of iterating on people's understanding of the technology because they are not structured exactly. Like maybe it's really hard to record videos of everything and have that always be up to date, or write articles and keep that always being up to date. But at a hackathon, the model is like just show up repeatedly at these types of events and just talk to people. And in the discussions, you will learn a lot. And then when you have a problem, you just go to the guy across the hall, ask them, how do I do this thing? And they'll give you the latest up-to-date answer on the spot. And so it's the fact that it's this like time and place wherein all of your questions will be answered in a relatively short time frame because everyone's in the room together, that enables you to like have a really fast knowledge transfer, as opposed to like written documents or videos, which theoretically are better. They're just in practice really hard to maintain. So at least in my experience, hackathons are just good for that reason. It's like a very special time and place where things can be learned fast. And in terms of outcomes, we do actually produce a lot of video content. Like if you go to our YouTube, we have like tons and tons of videos, and we try to add more from every event that are more of like a snapshot. We look at it more as a snapshot in time as opposed to like the de facto description of this technology. So there's a lot of content that gets produced, and then at the end of the day, it's the relationships that are formed that are also really valuable. So like a good example is Gitcoin. Like Scott and the end of the panel here is he met his co-founders at one of these hackathons. And so as a good output of the actual hackathon, or there's more teams in the industry now with a shared vision and a shared understanding of what they want to do together. So there's a lot of reasons. I could keep talking for ages about why hackathons are great. There's a lot of reasons why they're valuable, and I think they just they gloss over all these like issues that you described in a way that produces some value, maybe not the perfect value, but some good value to everybody.
Any chance you're going to Taipei soon?
We literally have like you name like a top like 100 populated city in the world. We have an email in our inbox of somebody that wants to run a hackathon there. I don't think we need to be the gatekeepers. If you guys want to run ETH Taipei, then run ETH Taipei. Like we'll definitely find a way to support you. We're just trying to run as many events as we can in places that we feel confident we can like structure it logistically. But there should definitely be an ETH Taipei. Whether it's us or you guys independently running it, that's a different question.
Sweet, thank you.
So if we are like running a hackathon, what's the like advice for our organizers?
Yeah, I think that's a really long answer. I think if you guys like follow up with me afterwards, I can give you the playbook and help you out.
I think that concludes our panel. And thank you all for joining, and thank you for wisdom you shared. Thank you very much.
谢谢。再次谢谢我们所有参与的